Rachel Zegler never imagined she'd walk into a movie theater, surrounded by her closest friends, and see little more than empty rows and echoing silence. But that's exactly what happened, according to social media snippets that have spread faster than wildfire. For a film carrying the iconic Snow White name and backed by the powerhouse that is Disney, the emptiness was more than just embarrassing. It was a sign of a full-blown catastrophe, from alleged behind-the-scenes feuds to controversial commentary on social media.
For which movie?
The Snow White remake has been mired in one PR nightmare after another. With a reported budget exceeding $250 million, many speculated it would be one of Disney's grandest live-action releases yet. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about how quickly a so-called sure thing can crash and burn. Yet the real story here isn't just about box office figures or a few awkward social media clips. It's about how one actress, once hailed as Hollywood's next golden star, found herself at the center of an unfolding drama that pitted her against co-stars, studio executives, and even longtime Disney fans.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her.
And while some might say the seeds of controversy were planted long before cameras started rolling, few predicted how monumental the fallout would become. But buckle up, because this story isn't just about empty theaters and poor ticket sales. What's been happening off the screen might be even more shocking. Wait until you see how one fateful theater visit spiraled into an internet sensation, setting the tone for all the chaos to come. On a chilly March evening in 2025, Rachel Zegler and a small group of friends strolled into a theater to watch Disney's much-hyped Snow White remake.
Despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
Normally, you'd expect lines of families and fans, maybe even a few cosplay enthusiasts excited to see their favorite fairy tale reimagined for modern times. Instead, Zegler and her entourage found themselves nearly alone. So alone, in fact, that the entire moment felt like a bizarre dream. A friend's Instagram story captured the awkwardness in real time. The marquee lights, the silent corridor, and Rachel cheering for herself on screen because there was no one else around to do it. The emptiness was unsettling.
Behind the scenes, you guys know as well as I do that those executives like Spielberg are looking at that saying, Rachel Zegler can F right off.
According to those who saw these clips, it felt more like a private screening than a public showing of a major Disney release. Even the employees seemed surprised when asked for tickets to Snow White, as if they'd forgotten the film was playing. Cue the internet's immediate reaction, memes comparing the deserted auditorium to a haunted house, jokes about how not even a discount night could attract more viewers, and speculation about whether Zegler had personally booked out the theater to avoid embarrassment. But the truth is often more mundane and more brutal.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There is a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Word on social media was that the theater simply hadn't sold tickets. Even if Zegler and friends hadn't shown up, the screening might have been equally desolate. That night marked a sobering realization for the actress. The gap between expectations and reality was miles wide. And if you thought the empty seats were bad, just wait until you hear how the numbers looked on paper. Because while a few dismal photos can go viral, the official box office stats told a far more catastrophic story.
If I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
For a film with a rumored $250+ million budget, analysts predicted at least a halfway decent opening weekend, especially given Disney's history with live-action remakes. Yet the Snow White reboot stumbled out of the gate with a shockingly low $3.5 million in Thursday previews, struggling to reach $43 million across the first weekend. By comparison, other modern remakes like The Little Mermaid brought in over twice that amount in the same time frame. Critics quickly labeled Snow White a royal disaster.
Snow White bombs, breaks records for the lowest live-action remake opening ever. Let me say that again, ever.
Fans across the country began sharing seating charts showing near-empty bookings in primetime slots. News outlets pounced on the bleak numbers. Some even ran headlines like Disney's Greatest Folly or Has the live-action bubble finally burst? Meanwhile, dedicated Disney fans expressed dismay on forums, describing how they felt let down by yet another reimagined classic that missed the mark. On X, formerly Twitter, and various social platforms, the condemnation came swiftly.
Now, of course, as we covered, the movie is terrible anyway in its own right. It was probably going to underperform regardless. People are tired of the soulless cash grab remake thing.
Viewers posted images of the lifeless theater lobbies, mocking Disney with hashtags like #SnowWhite and #BoxOfficeBlizzard, implying that the film had been buried by a snowstorm of disinterest. Professional critics were no kinder. Many lambasted the remake for lacking the heart, charm, and magic of the original 1937 masterpiece. Others felt the CGI dwarfs looked uncanny, failing to capture the warmth that Disney's animation once delivered so effortlessly. And overshadowing all of that was a swelling sentiment that something much deeper had gone wrong.
Rachel Zegler hurt the film's box office with her actions in since-deleted comment. This is the exchange.
Perhaps that the very marketing campaign was undercut by a wave of negative publicity, yet the real avalanche of criticism was only getting started. Because once old footage of Rachel Zegler's confidence hit the internet, it fueled a frenzy that no publicist could contain. Long before Snow White ever premiered, Rachel Zegler made headlines for her unwavering self-assurance. In a now infamous video clip circulating online, she passionately declared that people would line up to see her films no matter what.
Even if everything worked perfectly, it would have been almost impossible for this movie to succeed because you're comparing it to one of the most beloved films of all time and a truly groundbreaking movie.
She even compared her potential appeal to that of famous artwork at the Louvre, proclaiming she could only hope audiences would flock to her with that same enthusiasm. At the time, those comments seemed like a confident young actress merely expressing her aspirations. But once Snow White's dismal numbers came in, that old interview felt like a jarring contrast to reality. Suddenly, her words took on a new, almost ironic twist. Critics and Twitter pundits replayed the clip side by side with images of barren theaters, captioning it with, "Where did the lines go?" or "Reality hits harder than the Louvre." The sudden barrage of sarcastic commentary magnified every ounce of disappointment swirling around the film. As if that weren't enough, many fans dug up other statements where Zegler openly criticized traditional Disney tropes, like the idea of a Prince Charming or the notion of true love's kiss. Her remarks, intended to modernize a beloved classic, instead alienated some Disney faithful who felt she was disrespecting the original film.
The cartoon was made 85 years ago, and therefore it's extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power.
Question on everyone's mind, was this entire project doomed from the start because its lead star couldn't stop poking the bear? But Zegler's comments were hardly the only controversy brewing behind the curtain. Next up is a tale of clashing personalities, security scares, and personal politics that went far beyond mere disappointment at the box office. While public attention zeroed in on Snow White's commercial flop, insiders whispered about internal turmoil that might have sealed the film's fate long before opening day. One focal point, the alleged rift between Rachel Zegler and her co-star Gal Gadot, famous for her portrayal of the evil queen in the remake. During the press tour, the pair appeared cordial, even warm in interviews. But as the premiere date neared, eagle-eyed fans noticed that their body language shifted. Occasional social media jabs and cryptic comments only stoked the rumors. Then came the political storm. Zegler took a vocal stance on certain international issues.
They had her tweet out like a little, "Yay, Snow White, can't wait, so excited, I love to play her." And then she, like minutes later, followed it up with, "And never forget, free Palestine."
Posting messages that some interpreted as biased. Meanwhile, Gadot, who is Israeli and served in her country's military, found herself the target of intense backlash from certain online communities simply for her background. According to anonymous sources, Disney had to allocate additional security around Gadot due to rising threats tied directly to these political disputes. Behind the scenes, Disney executives were in crisis mode. According to reports from outlets like Variety, they flew top-level producers, including Mark Platt, across the country to speak to Zegler about toning down the charged social media posts. The worry was that her statements would alienate half the movie's potential audience. At one point, it was rumored that Disney offered to pay for a specialized social media manager to pre-approve every single thing she posted. Tension escalated when Zegler allegedly resisted at first, then reluctantly agreed only after multiple high-stakes meetings. Even more startling was the friction that grew between Zegler and Godot once these political lines were drawn.
Gal started getting death threats. She's Israeli. They flew an executive, one of the producers, out to go visit personally with Rachel Zegler to say, could you please take that down? And she wouldn't.
Online investigators pointed out how Zegler seemed to exclude Godot's name in otherwise lavish praise for her co-stars and production crew. Subtle Instagram snubs and pointed remarks led fans to theorize that these two leads weren't exactly living out a magical princess and queen bond. But these interpersonal dramas weren't the only controversy swirling around the production. An entirely different storm was brewing thanks to one of Hollywood's most outspoken actors and his fiery comments about outdated fairy tale tropes. Long before Snow White's release, Disney found itself walking a tightrope over how to handle the story's iconic seven dwarfs. In a podcast interview, acclaimed actor Peter Dinklage blasted the studio for what he saw as hypocrisy, celebrating diversity by casting a Latina Snow White, but still perpetuating what he considered a backward portrayal of dwarfs. The internet exploded in debate. Some applauded Dinklage for speaking truth to power, while others insisted that dwarf actors should have the chance to play these classic roles without the storyline being axed to avoid potential criticism. Disney responded with a promise to reimagine the dwarfs in a sensitive modern context, but what emerged was a puzzling mix of CGI stand-ins, each described by certain leakers as magical creatures meant to replace the original concept of dwarfs entirely. Fans quickly pounced on the uncanny visuals, calling them lifeless and bizarre, accusations that only grew louder when early promo shots leaked. Many lamented the loss of the dwarf's original charm, wondering if the remake had stripped away everything that made the 1937 classic an enduring treasure. These overlapping controversies, Zegler's remarks, Godot's challenges, and the dwarf's reimagining fomented a perfect storm of bad publicity. By the time Disney dropped the final trailer, the public discourse had already soured. Much of the conversation wasn't about the story's themes or the film's cinematography. It was about political drama, questionable CGI, and the perceived betrayal of a beloved classic. Still, Disney wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet, because when a colossal investment is on the line, studios pull out all the stops, and this time it meant a last-ditch effort at keeping the peace and salvaging the launch.
You're replacing jobs that people could have as little people. Okay. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, it's for dwarfs, you know?
With Snow White's release date looming, Disney tried to pivot from red-hot controversy to a more subdued approach. Instead of the usual star-studded, high-profile premieres in Hollywood and London's iconic Leicester Square, the events were dialed back significantly. Industry insiders whispered that Disney didn't want the film's biggest headlines to be about protesters, Twitter feuds, or awkward co-star moments on the red carpet, so they opted for private screenings, daytime press visits, and limited fanfare. Rumors swirled about last-minute reshoots or edited scenes, particularly concerning the dwarves, to appease critics from all sides. It's unclear how extensive those changes really were, but the production budget certainly ballooned beyond early estimates. Some claimed it exceeded $270 million once all was said and done. That's a massive gamble, even for a powerhouse like Disney, and the stakes grew higher with every negative tweet or think piece that emerged online.
That is totally uplifting and the right way to be woke, Link, when you actually cancel the roles for the marginalized population, because just putting them on screen is somehow racist.
Behind the scenes, you had an entire PR team working around the clock to reframe the narrative, focusing on empowerment themes, highlighting Rachel Zegler's singing prowess, and praising the film's lavish set designs. But each carefully crafted press release was overshadowed by the next wave of controversies, be it old quotes from Zegler or new speculation about on-set tension. Even internal memos, allegedly leaked by disgruntled staffers, suggested that the top brass felt the movie might never overcome its avalanche of bad buzz. As the actual premiere approached, fans noticed that marketing had shifted. Gone were the playful references to Snow White's romance or the adorable dwarfs. Instead, the promotion leaned heavily on modernizing a classic and championing strong female leads. Disney was trying to pivot the narrative. This Snow White wasn't about singing to forest animals and waiting for Prince Charming. It was about empowerment, independence, and self-discovery. But would that pivot work, or was the film's fate already sealed? When opening weekend finally arrived, the results were undeniable, and they left Disney wondering what lessons to learn from one of their costliest experiments ever.
The movie has all kinds of problems that could be pinned partly on the producer. Like, the producer did not do a good job. Nobody who produced this movie did a good job.
The final verdict on Disney's Snow White came not from critics alone, but from the masses, who by and large chose to stay home. Empty theaters, meager box office returns, and harsh reviews painted a picture of a studio scrambling to salvage a project overshadowed by controversy after controversy. Perhaps no single factor doomed the film. Rather, it was the compound effect of every misstep that turned what could have been a celebrated remake into a textbook cautionary tale. For Rachel Zegler, the ordeal might serve as a wake-up call. In an era where social media presence can be both an asset and a liability, striking the right tone is crucial. The same can be said for Disney, which seemed torn between pushing boundaries and protecting its 80-year legacy. Some wonder if this marks the end of the live-action remake craze. Did the audience finally tire of rehashed classics? Or was it the specific controversies that led to such a dramatic downfall? One thing is certain, Snow White will go down in history as a glaring example of how hype and brand recognition can't always guarantee success. In fact, sometimes the biggest names cast the longest shadows, and if you're not prepared to handle the scrutiny, you risk tripping over your own hype. What do you think? Did Disney's attempts to modernize a classic simply go too far? Or was the film doomed by the endless string of controversies and political drama? Let us know your thoughts. And if you still haven't had your fill of the Snow White saga, brace yourself, because there may be even more twists and turns on the horizon. If rumors of cast shakeups, rushed editing, and spin-off cancellations hold any truth, we might only be halfway through this roller coaster. Until then, consider this your reminder: in Hollywood, no fairy tale ending is ever guaranteed.